They say the strongest person in any room is never the loudest voice, the tallest figure, or the one wearing the most confidence. It's the individual who can quietly read the room and steer the direction without anyone realizing what just happened. And today, you're about to discover exactly how elite intelligence officers do that. Before we go deeper, hit like, share this episode with someone who loves psychology, and subscribe, because what you're about to learn can genuinely upgrade how you operate in conversations, negotiations, and high-pressure situations. Quick question for you. Have you ever felt like someone took over a conversation without being aggressive, and you couldn't figure out how they did it? Drop your experience in the comments. Someone out there will relate to your story more than you think. Now, let's begin the journey. Powerful control isn't about force. It's about influence without detection. Intelligence agencies understand human nature in a way most people never will. They study patterns, emotions, cognitive biases, and social dynamics, not to manipulate the average person, but to survive situations most of us will never face. Let's set the stage. Imagine being dropped into a foreign city where you don't speak the language, you have no contacts, and you're being tailed by someone whose intentions you don't know. Every gesture you make, every word you say, every decision in that moment determines whether you escape clean or you're compromised. Now compare that to your everyday life, negotiating at work, handling family conflict, confronting someone, building rapport with strangers, leading a team, even dealing with someone who challenges your confidence. Psychology is psychology. Whether used in the field or in a boardroom, human behavior operates on the same foundation. And that's why CIA officers master 7 psychological principles that allow them to stabilize chaos, command attention, influence outcomes, and maintain absolute presence. In this first part, we'll explore 4 of them in depth. Each one will reshape how you understand communication, emotional intelligence, and situational control. 1. The CIA master principle controlled the tempo. Control the outcome in the world of intelligence. Tempo is everything. Most people speak fast when stressed. They rush decisions when pressured. They react instantly when provoked. You've seen this happen. Someone gets emotional, and suddenly their tone changes. Their posture stiffens, their judgment collapses. They lose the rhythm of the conversation, and once rhythm is lost, control is gone. CIA officers learn a simple foundational truth. The person who controls the pace controls the power. Tempo is psychological gravity. If you slow the environment, others unconsciously follow. If you speed it up, they match you, often without realizing why. Here's the real-world application from agency training fundamentals. In tense negotiations, officers intentionally speak a little slower, move a little calmer, and allow silence to linger. This creates invisible pressure, not on them, but on the other person, because silence is uncomfortable. Most people rush to fill it. They reveal information. They justify their position. They lose leverage. In contrast, the one who's calm becomes the psychological anchor of the room. You've probably experienced a moment when someone stayed quiet for just 1 second too long after you said something, and suddenly you wondered if you said the wrong thing. That's the tempo. It shapes emotions more powerfully than logic ever will. In everyday life, controlling tempo means slowing. You're breathing before responding, letting moments breathe, not reacting to provocation, speaking with intentional cadence. Reducing impulsive decisions. This isn't manipulation, it's leadership. CIA officers aren't trying to hypnotize people. They're trying to create psychological clarity so they can remain objective in high-stakes situations. Most people react. The trained few regulate. And that difference changes everything too. The covert confidence. Signal emotional neutrality under pressure. They think confidence is being bold, loud, expressive, dominant. But in high-stakes intelligence work, those traits are liabilities. The real psychological power is emotional neutrality, the ability to remain steady when the environment becomes chaotic. Imagine you're in a meeting and someone disrespects you. Most people react, defend themselves, raise their voice, speak more than they should. Why? Because emotions hijack rational thinking. But real intelligence officers practice a concept known as effective detachment, a structure of emotional discipline where you acknowledge your feelings but never let them leak out. Emotional neutrality is not being emotionless. It's being uncontrolled by emotions. When you're neutral, You don't show frustration when someone challenges you. You don't reveal insecurity when someone intimidates you. You don't display surprise even when a situation shifts. You don't mirror the emotional instability of the environment instead. You remain calm, collected, grounded. You become the psychological constant. CIA officers use emotional neutrality not to deceive, but to protect themselves. In dangerous contexts, showing fear can elevate risk. Showing anger can break rapport. Showing discomfort can attract the wrong attention. And this translates into everyday situations. Think about the strongest people you've ever met. They weren't the loud ones. They were the composed ones. They had an aura that said, "You cannot shake me." That's emotional neutrality. Now, here's the deeper psychological reason why it's effective. People instinctively trust stable energy. We lean toward calm leaders, composed decision makers, people who don't crumble under pressure. Their emotional consistency suggests competence, control, and confidence even before they say a single word. When you remain neutral while everyone else becomes emotional, the environment begins to orbit around you. Not because you forced control, but because you embodied it. Point 3. The human radar technique, reading micro shifts before they explode contrary to Hollywood myths. Spies don't read minds. But what they do read with astonishing accuracy is micro shifts, subtle, nearly invisible details that reveal changes in mood, intention, or emotional state. This is one of the most misunderstood aspects of intelligent psychology. People think officers learn magical behavioral hacks, but in reality, it's simply scientific observation. Micro shifts include a small change in eye direction, a brief pause in speech, a shift in breathing rhythm, a twitch of the jaw, a slight change in shoulder tension, a hand that goes still, a foot that suddenly starts tapping, a voice tone that tightens for one word. None of these mean anything on their own, but officers observe patterns, not isolated behaviors. For example, if someone normally maintains eye contact but suddenly avoids it after a specific question, that's a shift. If someone normally speaks quickly but slows down at one topic, that's a shift. Microshift reading is about understanding this. Any change means something changed internally, not necessarily deception. Often it signals discomfort, uncertainty, hesitation, or emotional activation. When officers detect a microshift, they don't accuse, confront, or react. They simply observe and adjust. They take the conversation in a calmer direction, reduce tension, explore the topic later, or focus on stabilizing the environment. Here's the beauty. You don't need espionage training to read my. You just need one habit: watch people before they speak. Look at their baseline. Observe how they naturally behave when relaxed. That baseline becomes your reference point. Then, when something shifts, you'll pick it up instantly, without judgment. This skill makes you socially intelligent, it makes you persuasive, it makes you aware, and most importantly, it reduces misunderstandings. Because you begin to see not what people say, but what they mean. For control through framework, the OODA loop advantage. This one comes from military and intelligence decision-making science, and it's one of the most powerful psychological tools for controlling outcomes in fast-moving situations. OODA stands for Observe, Orient, Decide, Act. It's not a spy trick. It's a cognitive architecture that helps people think clearly under stress. But here's the part most people never understand. The goal is not to complete your loop faster. It's to disrupt the other person's loop. Imagine two minds interacting. The one whose mental loop is stable, clear, and well-structured naturally takes control of the situation, even if they're quiet, introverted, or soft-spoken. CIA personnel train to anchor themselves in this loop, no matter how chaotic the moment is. Here's how it works in human interaction. 1. Observe you take in everything: body language, tone, environment, emotional temperature, social dynamics. No assumptions, just clean observation. Point 2. You align what you observed with reality, context, and your objectives. You mentally position yourself inside the moment rather than being swept by it. 3. Decide you make a choice, not impulsively, not emotionally, but strategically. For Act 2, execute the decision with clarity and confidence. And once you act, you instantly return to step 1 and start the loop again. People who don't use OODA react impulsively. People who use OODA respond intelligently. But here's the psychological control element. When you stay in your OODA loop but remain calm, the other person unconsciously follows your pace. Their decision-making slows down. Their emotional reactivity reduces. Their ability to escalate drops. You're not overpowering them, you're stabilizing them. And stability is control. Where this is leading, you've now learned 4 foundational psychological structures used by intelligence professionals to maintain presence, influence outcomes, and regulate chaos. Control the tempo, emotional neutrality, reading microshifts, OODA, loop clarity now. We're going deeper into the mechanisms that allow CIA officers to establish dominance through subtle authority, shape conversations subconsciously, and turn unpredictable interactions into predictable outcomes. Power isn't in words. Power isn't in dominance. Power isn't in confidence alone. Power is in the way you shape a moment without forcing it, the way you guide emotions without suppressing them, the way you create clarity when others lose their grip. That's the essence of real psychological control, and that's what elite intelligence officers practice every day. In part 1 of the video, you explored the first 4 principles: tempo, emotional neutrality, microshifts, and OODA clarity. Those are the internal pillars, the skills that stabilize the self. And part 2 takes you into the external architecture of control, how CIA officers guide perceptions, build instant trust, steer conversations, and influence environments without appearing dominant. This is where human psychology becomes an art form. Let's go deeper. 5. The framing advantage. Whoever defines the reality, controls the reality. Controls the reality. There is a psychological law that intelligence agencies master early. People don't react to situations, they react to the frame of the situation. The frame is the invisible lens through which a moment is interpreted. Whoever sets the frame defines the meaning, and whoever defines the meaning influences the direction. In intelligence work, framing is not manipulation, it's survival. If an officer lets the other person define the meaning of the interaction, the dynamic can become unpredictable or dangerous. Framing changes the emotional atmosphere. Framing shapes expectations. Framing creates context. Imagine an intelligence officer meeting a source who is hesitant, guarded, unsure. Instead of pushing or persuading, the officer reframes the meeting with a subtle psychological shift. Let's just talk openly, no pressure. If something matters, we'll get there naturally. What happens? The frame becomes safe instead of interrogative. When people feel safe, they open up. When people open up, the objective becomes achievable. Here's the deeper psychology. The first person to set the frame becomes the mental leader of the moment. In daily life, framing looks like this. Someone confronts you aggressively. You don't match their intensity. Instead, you stay calm and say, "I can see this matters to you. Let's figure out what's actually going on." Immediately, the frame changes from conflict gives problem solving. Their emotional state begins to align with yours. You've taken control without force. Or, in another scenario, you enter a meeting where tension is high. Before anything begins, you speak calmly. Before we jump into decisions, let's make sure everyone here understands the same facts. Once we have clarity, the rest is easy. Instantly, you've become the stabilizing force, the frame setter. CIA officers understand something crucial. People don't follow authority, they follow stability. And the one who sets the frame is almost always the stable one. Here's why framing works. The human brain craves context, and the first context it receives becomes the foundation for all future interpretation. That's the priming effect, one of the strongest cognitive biases in human psychology. If you provide a calm frame first, others subconsciously align with it. If you provide a focused frame, others concentrate. If you provide a solution-oriented frame, others stop being defensive. Framing is psychological gravity. Everything bends around it. 6. The rapport switch, building trust without trying to win. When most people think of spies building rapport, they imagine charm, charisma, smooth conversation. But the truth is more subtle and far more powerful. Real intelligence rapport is not about getting people to like you. It's about making them feel seen. Here's the secret. People trust those who understand their internal world, not those who impress them, not those who flatter them, not those who dominate conversations. Trust is built through alignment, not persuasion. CIA officers use something called adaptive mirroring, but not in the shallow copy someone's body language sense you see in pop psychology. It's deeper. It's about mirroring emotional states, not physical gestures. When someone is anxious, you don't overwhelm them with high energy. You stabilize your presence. You lower your tone. You reduce your pace. When someone is frustrated, you don't become defensive. You acknowledge tension. You give space. You become the calmer pole. When someone is excited, you allow warmth. You match enthusiasm gently. You build connections through aligned energy. This is the rapport switch. You shift your emotional frequency to match the environment, then raise it to where you want the moment to go. This is how CIA officers build trust in minutes. They don't manipulate emotions. They simply enter the other person's psychological space, understand it, and lead them towards stability. Here's a real concept from behavioral science. Humans are wired for attunement. When someone attunes to your emotional state, your nervous system softens. You feel safer. You communicate more openly. Rapport is built not through words, but through emotional synchronization. But here's the part most people miss. Rapport doesn't mean agreement. It means understanding. You don't need to approve of someone to understand them. You don't need to share their beliefs to empathize with their feelings. You don't need to mirror their personality to build trust. Rapport is influence without pressure, connection without force, alignment without manipulation. And once rapport is established, the conversation becomes fluid. The environment becomes cooperative. The person becomes open to your perspective, not because you pushed them, but because they trusted you enough to follow your lead. 7. The environmental power principle. Dominance comes from position, not personality. Now we enter an advanced psychological principle, one rarely talked about outside professional contexts. In intelligence and law enforcement psychology, the environment shapes behavior more than personality does. This is grounded in environmental psychology and social ergonomics. The environment influences eye contact, direction, movement, flow, breathing patterns, dominance signals, emotional regulation, comfort levels, power perceptions. Officers learn something surprising. You can control a situation more effectively by controlling the space than by controlling the person. Here's how environment influences psychological power. 1. Physical positioning. The person who positions themselves in a place of visibility and calm naturally becomes the psychological leader. Sit where you can see the entrance. Stand where the room is balanced around you. Place yourself at angles, not head-on confrontations. Why? Because people interpret spatial confidence as internal confidence. 2. Distance management. Too close creates a threat. Too far creates distrust. The right distance creates comfort and influence. In intelligence work, officers calibrate distance based on the emotional state of the other person. If someone is nervous, distance gives them space to breathe. If someone is scattered, slight closeness creates grounding. 3. Environmental anchoring. Objects matter. Space matters. Angles matter. Agency training teaches officers to choose positions that give them cognitive stability. This reduces stress and increases clear thinking. Imagine you're in a room where you feel cornered. Your decision-making collapses. But when you're in a position that feels balanced, your mind becomes clearer. The environment sets the internal state. The internal state shapes the interaction. The interaction defines the control. In daily life. If you sit hunched over at a table, you feel smaller. If you stand near noise, your thoughts scatter. If you sit facing a bright light, you feel pressured. If you choose a calm spot, you influence the emotional tone. Psychology is physical. Control is environmental before it is verbal. CIA officers use the environment not to dominate people, but to stabilize themselves, because the stable person is the influential person. Now step back and see the full picture. In first part of the video, you learned the internal tools, tempo, control, emotional neutrality, micro-shift awareness, OODA clarity. In second part of the video, you learned the external tools, framing rapport, switching environmental influence together. These form what intelligence agencies call psychological situational mastery, the ability to remain calm, clear, attuned, and adaptive in any environment. This isn't about manipulation. This isn't about overpowering others. This is about self-command, which naturally creates situational command. The real power isn't in forcing anyone. The real power is in shaping the moment through presence, clarity, and psychological architecture. When you combine internal stability with external influence, you become the calmest person in any room. And calmness is magnetic. It draws people toward you. It earns respect. It creates space for intelligence to operate and emotions to settle. This is why intelligence officers succeed in moments where normal people freeze. They're not superhuman. They're not born different. They train to master their inner world so they can navigate the outer one. And now you've learned the foundational psychological principles behind that mastery. Which of these 7 principles do you think would transform your conversations or leadership the most if you started applying it today? Share your answer below. Someone reading your comment will connect with it more deeply than you imagine. If this episode expanded your understanding of human psychology and gave you real value, make sure you like the video, share it, and subscribe for more powerful Spycology content. It helps the channel grow, and it allows us to keep creating psychology breakdowns just like this one. And always remember, you don't control situations by force, you control them by understanding the mind behind the moment.